So today I'm really excited to be joined by a guest who has a bit of a unique journey in software development. So typically when I've had guests on, they've come from a software development background, but today's guest started their career in software testing and then progressed to a development manager position. So Cian, thank you for joining me today.
Hello.
And I appreciate you giving a bit of an intro there, but would you mind just giving a bit of introduction to yourself for everyone that's listening?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Cian McCormack. I live in Newcastle and have done for 10 years now. I work for Inflow Software, and I've been in the industry around a few different jobs for just over 10 years now.
Great. And what age did you get started in software development, would you say, or get an interest in software?
I mean, originally interested in software, we're talking like 3 or 4 years old, but I actually got into the industry about 23, I think, yeah.
Great. And I guess from a young age, did you think that was an industry you wanted to get in? I guess it'd be interesting to know sort of what was your journey? Did you go down a traditional university graduate route, or was it something that you developed the skills by learning them in your own time?
Educationally, I actually took maths at uni, so I didn't really go down the traditional IT route even back then, really. But after uni, I spent a bit of time doing some kind of chefing and bar work type jobs, and then, yeah, just kind of wanted to actually start making a bit of a career for myself, really. So through my CV online, got picked up by a fantastic company called FDM Group, who they hire graduates and place them in all different kinds of roles all over the country. We agreed that software testing was probably my best skill set, kind of finding out how things work and then finding out where the problems are within those things. They placed me at Virgin Money up in Newcastle, and I've been here ever since.
Brilliant. Yeah, I've heard of FDM working in recruitment. I've come across some of their sort of graduates, I guess, or people that have been through their sort of scheme. How long were you there, and do you feel like it's a good opportunity to like learn on the job?
Absolutely, yeah. They give you, I think it's 10 to 14 weeks of training before they actually place you at a client, and then they give you a 2-year contract to kind of work off that training. And yeah, I would say it's a fantastic opportunity, really, to kind of, as you say, grow yourself on the job. So I was with them for 3 years in total. I spent the entire 3 years at Virgin Money working with FDM. We were their kind of first cohort that they'd actually provided Virgin Money, so it was quite a a good time for them to solidify that relationship, as it were.
Yeah. Great. And from our chat earlier, you mentioned that you were from Essex, so came up to the northeast, I guess, because of that job, and sort of settled here since.
That's right. Yeah. Uni in Wales at 18.
Yeah.
And then briefly moved back in with my parents in Essex while I was doing my FDM training in London, and then placed in Newcastle.
Great. And I guess that's I guess the start of the journey, which is great. So a good thing for me to understand would be how you sort of progressed into becoming a development manager and sort of into like the career that you're in now, and how that journey was for you in terms of opportunities. And usually I ask the question on this podcast with my guests about, did you always feel like you'd become a manager, or was it something you kind of stumbled into in terms of when the opportunity arose? So what was it like in your experience?
I guess I'll answer that question directly first. So I think I very much kind of chased it. I wanted to be at a point where I could actually make meaningful change for the company that I was working for, speaking about Inflow specifically. And like the opportunities that I had and that they were willing to provide for me, got me where I am, I'd say. Looking further back, so I guess started with Virgin Money as a tester. Took me a little while to kind of learn the ropes of how they worked, I guess, kind of 2 years in, well, about that, yes, we'll say, I had pretty much automated my entire regression suite, which was before then unheard of. Like, no one was really doing that at Virgin Money. And kind of starting to realize that our kind of way of working was quite waterfall, and I was hearing, like, you know, agile being thrown around a little bit, but I couldn't really see it being done particularly correctly, I guess. And at the time, I was also pushing for a senior role in my team, which I was unsuccessful for. And kind of all those things culminated into me kind of wondering what else was out there, really. And at that point, I applied for a role at ScottLogic, a Northeast consultancy. I was very lucky to be successful there, and realised, it must have been the first couple of days, just how kind of good they were at software delivery, really. I was sat in a team of people who were kind of, I mean, definitely my intellectual superiors. You know, they were an absolutely outstanding group of people. They knew a lot, and I learned a lot from them. And I guess picking up on a lot of that knowledge over a kind of 3 or 4 years, I think I was at ScottLogic for. That kind of stood me in really good stead. And then I guess towards the back of it, our client were just finishing up delivering a piece of software that we'd been working with them on for a couple of years, and someone reached out to me again and kind of said, like, hey, there's this exciting opportunity with Inflow Software. They're looking for a test manager. Would you be interested? And I figured, you know, this was a good opportunity for me to take everything that I'd learned and apply it to a smaller business that was kind of just coming out of its startup phase and looking to understand how to grow and move fast and do testing well and all these kind of things. And yeah, again, lucky to be successful there. So I started with them as a test manager 3.5 years ago. Quickly moved up to kind of heading the delivery function generally. So kind of took the development cohort under my wing as well. And then eventually kind of created the product ownership line to form like a completely streamlined team kind of system. And I guess, yeah, that's where I am now, really.
Yeah, I do remember you from the ScottLogic days, because we sponsored some of the ministry testing meetups, and I know that was something that you were heavily involved in the meetups, and also with the test atelier as well. How did you feel that sort of helped you in your sort of development, and as, I guess, you know, somebody who is giving back, I guess, to the community as well?
I think my favourite thing about those meetups was seeing that everybody is in the same boat, really. Just kind of understanding that we can all help each other and learn from each other was a realization I guess I hadn't really had until I started meeting people in a room regularly and kind of talking about our problems and realizing that, you know, I've had that problem before, or you've had a problem that I'm now having. So yeah, just the opportunity to kind of discuss where the industry is, like, collectively, was extremely beneficial.
Yeah. I do remember one of the talks, it was about imposter syndrome. I'm not sure if you remember that one, but that was a really good talk.
I do.
That was a really interesting one in terms of how you can view it as a positive rather than a negative. So that was really eye-opening. So obviously, me, I'm not a software tester, but it still really resonated with me. And I think that was the beauty of it, where, you know, talks like that can resonate with everybody in the room. So I just want to pick up on something you mentioned earlier about when you joined ScottLogic, you know, you were in the room with, you know, like you said, a lot of intelligent people there. So, you know, there's a saying you've probably seen around, which says that, you know, if you're the most intelligent in the room, you know, you're likely in the wrong room. Yeah, absolutely. So, just on that, you know, how do you feel working there sort of really helped you develop, you know, and sort of what areas do you feel that was as well?
I think, to be honest, the amount of things that I kind of picked up while I was there, there was things that I hadn't even considered as important to software delivery before I moved to ScottLogic. Things like, you know, the infrastructure that your system is hosted on, the architecture, and how every individual service kind of talks to each other, and I think the project management side of things as well. So understanding a bit more around Scrum Mastery and product ownership, and then understanding how all that wraps into kind of larger and more timely projects, I guess, like that roll over months and occasionally years.
Yeah.
Specific to testing as well, I learned a lot more about automation across all levels of the system. So learning that it wasn't just running scripts over like a UI sort of thing. It wasn't just Selenium. There was actually a lot more to it, from unit tests all the way up. It's pretty eye-opening, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess kind of other, I guess I'll say management skills really around kind of client relationships and how to kind of recruit and interview people as well. Down to public speaking and all that kind of stuff. So there was a wealth of stuff there for me.
I think that experience it sounds like it's put you in good stead, because a lot of stuff you mentioned about like software delivery, you know, probably the project management side of things probably put you in good stead when it comes to then managing a team. So I appreciate you joined Inflow as a test manager, but all the other things that you've learned, and also about Agile and Scrum, that I can see how that has then helped you, I guess, develop into the position that you're in at the moment. So how long have you been are you a head of development at the moment? Are you a software development manager?
Head of engineering.
Head of engineering is the title, yeah. And how long have you been in that position currently?
Just over a year at this point.
Yeah. Great. And when starting off in the position, or even, you know, because I'd still say you're pretty much, you know, at the start of that role, have you sort of sought out any mentors, or how's been, you know, what's been the best way in which you sort of feel like you've been sort of developing your skills?
Yeah, I guess I lean on my COO quite a lot at the moment, just to kind of understand more around the business expectations, really. So I guess head of engineering as a role is kind of evolving at the moment. So it used to be heavily on the side of kind of engineering excellence and operational excellence, and, you know, doing the best that you can with the resources that you've got. But now it's actually got this kind of secondary, well, actually 50-50 split really of helping and understanding like business objectives and how engineering best assists in delivering those. So I learn a lot from Graham, from my COO, about that second side of it, and then the operational side of things. Again, I'm still, you know, blessed to be surrounded by very, very smart people in my my platform team who help with the infrastructure and architecture. I would say I've learned plenty from every individual developer that I have as well. Kind of understanding their current problems and what they're trying to solve and how they solve it, and then kind of trying to provide them a platform and a culture and everything else that they need to kind of be able to do their job well. And then outside of my kind of company as well, there's still plenty of people that I can kind of reach out to and speak to about problems if I have any.
What's the makeup of your team currently?
So we have nearly 50 people in engineering, split between product owners, developers, and testers. And then we have a kind of Scrum Master / Agile coach. We've got a kind of platform team who, like I said, are responsible for the infrastructure, architecture, and then myself.
And do you have, I guess, managers underneath you that then report into you, or do you tend to, I guess, look after the whole 50 when it comes to the management tasks, I guess, in terms of one-to-ones, mentoring, or do you have that that you can sort of have somebody else doing that on your behalf and then reporting into you? So do you, I guess, delegate? Do you delegate to anybody below you? That's what I was trying to get at.
I think so. I mean, I find this topic fascinating. I really do.
Yeah.
I think traditional management is kind of on its way out, really, at this point. I think humans don't need someone standing over them, telling them what to do every day, kind of assessing their performance, telling them if they can or can't take holidays, kind of assigning them jobs to do on a daily basis. I certainly don't think that works for engineers. I think they're far too, I don't know if stubborn's the right word, but you know. So I take my approach from a number of different books and also kind of experience and personal learning. And so my team specifically operate on a degree of really, really high trust. So I provide them as much autonomy as I can. Each individual team, so I mentioned I've got 50 people, but they're split up into, I think, 7 engineering teams at the moment. So it's a product owner, 4 developers and a tester to each team. And each of those individual teams is largely responsible for their own kind of day-to-day work. So, you know, when it comes to holidays, they organise themselves, they let each other know if they're not feeling well. I don't really have to get involved much in that kind of, I don't know, administration side of things. Also, when it comes to kind of personal growth and career progression, so we've got a kind of a robust framework in place that allows them to take control of their own progression as much as they want to. And then within their teams, again, at least once a month, they are having these discussions within their sprint retrospectives about how they feel they're progressing, about how their team kind of feels they're progressing, and they kind of, you know, compare to each other. Am I doing this as well as you think I'm doing this? Is there anywhere that you think I need to improve? Those kind of things. So each individual is kind of largely responsible for their own progression, really. And I typically get involved when someone doesn't know the answer to a question, which is, you know, it happens occasionally. The frameworks aren't perfect, but it means I can largely be quite hands-off, really, and kind of, yeah, give them the autonomy that they deserve, I think.
Yeah. Okay. And so you mentioned you've got experience from working and you've got some experience from books as well. Is that the route? I'll start again. I don't know why I went American there. So you mentioned earlier about reading books and getting experience from doing the management.
Mm-hmm.
How do you sort of go about then improving your own management skills? And I guess another question to that from what you've just talked about is, I appreciate you're quite hands off. So what would you say is your management style? If you feel like you've got one, or how would you describe yourself as a manager?
I think as styles go, my leadership falls heavily into mentoring and coaching categories more than specifically management. So I try and kind of support and provide platforms for people to grow themselves and kind of lend a guiding hand as and when I need to, or if they ask for it, rather than directing and delegating as such. I'm learning that sometimes a little directorship is necessary, but it's not where my capabilities naturally lie. So when it comes to improving myself and my kind of my management abilities, as it were, or leadership abilities, that's where I kind of typically tend to look for help. Yeah, for if it requires a more firm hand, then yeah. So guess in terms of what specifically I've done to improve in that area, I guess it's various courses really. So we've had a few, different consultants come into the business and help us with kind of management and leadership over the years I've been there. I think that's about it really. It's mostly just leaning on people that have been in the industry for a long time and know how they can help.
So I know I mentioned like imposter syndrome earlier with a talk that I'd seen at the Ministry of Testing, but have you ever felt like that, or have you ever felt like when your teams come to you with a question or you weren't sure on it? When I've spoken to guests previously, they mentioned that they were just really honest with their team and said, look, I don't know the answer to that right now, but if you give me a bit of time, I'll come back to you on it, and they'll go away, they'll research into, how best to deliver either mentorship or, an answer to a question they've got. I appreciate there's probably been scenarios like that in, during your... So what was your experience with that?
Ongoing, to be honest, yeah. It still happens every now and then that someone will ask me a question that floors me. I think my approach to it would typically be helping them help themselves, as they say. Have you tried researching this a little bit first? Have you got any initial thoughts of your own before I kind of put words into your mouth? And then if they come back for a second time and say, like, I'm still not really sure what to do with this, that's when I'll kind of, I'll typically work with them, to be honest. I wouldn't go away and find an answer and then give it to them. I'd work alongside them and help them understand what my process is so that maybe they can apply it next time.
Yeah.
Assuming it's better than theirs, which, isn't always the case either.
Yeah,
so.
no, absolutely. And I think from listening to the environment that you're in, it seems like there's a lot of autonomy and a lot of trust. There's a famous quote by Peter Drucker, which is, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So what are your thoughts on this quote, and do you feel like that's something that you've got going on at Inflow at the moment?
I'd like to think so, yeah. And I couldn't agree more with the quote, to be honest. I think you can have the most prescriptive, kind of step-by-step accurate strategy that you can imagine up, but if you don't have the trust of your team, if they don't identify with your vision, and if they don't enjoy their day-to-day, then that strategy, like all best laid plans, really, it's going to go out the window as soon as the first shot's fired,
Yeah. How do you build a positive team culture within your software team?
So I've already talked about, teams having high trust and high autonomy. I think that's a massive part of it, that people are naturally wanting to do the best that they can if they have an environment and a culture where they feel free to do so. Culture itself is an intangible thing, right? It's not something you can have any direct impact on. It's just the result of a number of actions over a period of time. I think referring to those books that I've mentioned, I guess I've not actually given you any names yet, have I? But so books like Accelerate and Radical Enterprise, they talk a lot about a generative Western culture where information flows freely, failure leads to inquiry, bridges are built between teams. I think leadership obviously plays an extremely key part in any kind of generative culture as well. So I guess I personally just try and embody those features, if you will, kind of what's known as transformational leadership, is mentioned in Accelerate. And they've got kind of five key pillars, really. They've got vision, intellectual stimulation, inspirational communication, supportive leadership, and personal recognition. I just try and kind of live by those five as much as I can.
Yeah. Who's the author of that book?
I believe Kim Jean, and
But
I can't remember. It's a collection. Yeah,
it's a collection. No worries. And I know we've sort of touched upon it because we've talked about culture. So I know within that you've probably talked about, the type of management that you sort of believe in. You feel like obviously the traditional methods aren't the way to go. But I guess what would you say is your like leadership style currently? And I guess it can be subject to change, but what is your leadership style and why?
My style heavily kind of falls into the mentoring and coaching categories. I've had a very recent what they call like questionnaire kind of survey type thing as part of one of my management courses that has specifically told me what my management style is.
Yeah.
And I believe I scored 0 in directing. So I'm not a director at all. Very much a kind of coach and mentor. I prefer to guide people to learn for themselves as much as I can. And again, appreciating that directorship is occasionally necessary, and growing myself to learn a little bit more about how I can apply that a bit more. But it's definitely not my natural wheelhouse,
Yeah. And in a lot of teams, there's naturally going to be conflict. So do you feel conflict is important in high performing teams, and sort of how do you deal with conflict yourself?
Yeah. I think it's a natural thing. It's a healthy thing. I think it's a key part of personal and organizational growth. But it has to exist healthily as part of a kind of an already psychologically safe atmosphere. I think conflict in the form of debating the best of two good ways to go forward, or in kind of learning after an incident that the kind of the systemic blameless root cause of failure. So you look to the systems and how it allowed people to do the wrong thing rather than just hunting for the person that did the wrong thing. I think those are the kind of safe approaches to conflict that you can provide. I think conflict for conflict's sake is usually a sign that your culture isn't as positive as it needs to be. And if people aren't feeling safe to fail, or like they can be candidly investigated, then you're not having the kind of positive conflict that breeds a good high-performing team, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I just want to change track a little bit. So I like to ask the guests sort of questions regarding interviews and interview process, because I work with a lot of developers and actually do work with testers as well. Mm-hmm. So I thought it could be quite good to sort of get your view on that. And firstly, maybe to talk about whether, in your experience, you've worked with any testers or developers that have sort of progressed quite quickly in their career, and what you feel were the reasons for that, and if there's any sort of traits or any examples that you've got in terms of what they did well.
Yeah, I can think of plenty. I think in each case, the main contributing factor that I can see is those people either being in or coming from cultures that, again, kind of provide that psychological safety, readily available mentors and leaders that encourage personal growth. I think them having strong platform backgrounds that allow them to kind of develop rapidly and fail fast, learn fast, and be in an environment where it's okay to fail. That kind of provided that there's strong guardrails in place to prevent failure causing major problems, then that kind of environment and that kind of culture typically would, I think, bring people to be a lot more kind of confident in their approach and themselves, really. So I guess, confidence plays quite a key part in a lot of ways.
So it's quite interesting because you mentioned the environment there as well. So would you suggest for somebody who's interviewing to really find out what the environment is like for progression, for learning, and I guess focus on prioritising those to get further ahead in their career?
Absolutely, yeah. I think at the end of the day, your personal progression is the most important thing, right? Everyone deserves to progress. So yeah, I would say that should absolutely be the first thing that people ask about, and it's certainly a question that I get asked a lot. I'm extremely glad that we have a framework in place, because I imagine we probably wouldn't have had half of the successful candidates that we would otherwise. So
Yeah. What qualities do you tend to look for in either, any tech professional that you're looking to employ into your team?
So our interviews are generally focused on technical capability, which we kind of assess through your classic tech challenge, which we then have reviewed by a couple of our team members, who then run an interview where we focus on the second important thing, I would say equally important, which is their ability to discuss their approach. So I guess we don't necessarily mind if there's a solution to a tech challenge that's not how we would have done it, or that doesn't achieve the end goal that you originally set out to do. We're just as interested in how you explain why you tried to solve something in a certain way, and if you didn't achieve it, then what was kind of stopping you, how you'd approach it differently next time.
Yeah. And what are some common pitfalls that you see tech professionals make during the interview process?
The most common one that I've seen in the past is definitely resistance to being questioned on choices. I think if you're not open to the possibility that your approach wasn't the best, or that you were wrong, then chances are you're not going to thrive in a kind of strongly self-organized environment where people do challenge each other regularly,
So how important do you feel continuous learning is for progression?
I guess clues in the name, really, right? With progression, I don't think you can progress your thinking or your capabilities without learning new ways to tackle old issues. I think growth is a pretty fundamental need, really. The interesting thing is that given the right environment, culture, and space, humans have a natural aptitude for growing themselves, and to kind of solve problems that they can see in front of them rather than problems that they're given.
What would you say are the resources that really helped you sort of develop, your career, firstly obviously in software testing, and then, progressing to head of engineering? So that could be things outside of work, or resources, within work as well. What do you think? And again, obviously you can draw upon experience of your current company as well. What sort of things do you think work well for that?
I guess I'll walk through some of my regularly referenced materials first.
Yeah.
So I rely a lot on Accelerate, which I've already mentioned, Radical Enterprise, which I've already mentioned. I've got the Phoenix Project in my bag next to me. Like, I take that everywhere. I think that's a fantastic book. I think probably on my fourth read through at this point. I reference Engineering at Google, the DevOps Handbook, Team Topologies, The Goal, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Not many of them are particularly new, but their messages still stand, right? They are fantastic materials. And then, like you say, I kind of sprinkle in my own experience here and there where I need to. I guess my experience I attribute largely to meetups, mentors, leaders that I've respected and enjoyed working with, really. I think you said it earlier, right, that if you're not in an environment that kind of encourages and promotes personal growth, I would say, do everything in your power to find one that does.
Yeah.
I think life's too short to be stuck behind old traditional ways that kind of don't respect the individual. And you deserve more.
Yeah. I think it's a good point you made there, because from my experience, I've known you for quite a few years now, pre-COVID, and you're very heavily involved in the meetup space, in running the test atelier, and I sort of encourage junior developers or junior testers to come along to these events, because I feel like it's great to build your knowledge, also network and connect with like-minded people, and like you mentioned, I'm sure you've met other leaders, other mentors because of that.
Yeah.
not only that, I had a graduate software developer who came along to my meetup, and he was looking for a graduate role. I didn't have one at the time, but a couple of months later when I did, he was like the first person I thought of, because he came along to the meetup. You know, he told me his story, I guess, you know, met with him, and he was just front of mind, and I was able to place him there. So I think there's a lot of benefits that people can get from attending meetups, not just sort of meeting a recruiter, but, you know, for example, like Scott Logic, if they met somebody from Scott Logic, there was an opening there, and they, like, you know, they made that introduction, you know, I'm sure they'd notice it in an application. So I feel like giving value back, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of benefits from attending meetups and going that extra mile to continuously learning and developing yourself. I think it can stand you out against other people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even just the small amount of effort that it takes just to put yourself out there a little bit is enough to be recognised, for sure. Yeah, being seen at those places, as well as then actually learning from them and kind of sharing that experience, yeah, does definitely help a candidate stand out.
Yeah. What would you say the future holds for Cian? And I guess, you know, where would you like to go, if you can share that? I was speaking to other guests who've talked about in the future they wouldn't mind either, you know, doing coaching, mentoring from themselves. But, you know, I guess what are your sort of plans for the near future?
I mean, in a nutshell, it's really just continue. I think our company have some pretty lofty goals. We've got this vision of completely rewriting the world of auditing as we know it, essentially. We want to make it a kind of far more attractive role, I would say. Obviously, engineering plays a huge part in the success of that vision, and to that end, my goals kind of involve elevating my delivery teams with everything I've mentioned before, you know, like the platform, the culture. So on-demand deployment capabilities. I want to get as much accurate data about customer usage metrics and delivery methodology metrics as we can gather. I want a kind of fail fast, learn fast culture that embraces the scientific method, really. You know, you do an experiment, does it pass or fail? You move on. I want psychological safety for people to be able to speak freely and be kind of candidly vulnerable, which is talked about in Radical Enterprise again. Teams that kind of continuously gratify each other and just continue creating that kind of high trust environment, really, that everybody thrives in.
Fantastic. Cian, it's been a pleasure. It's been great speaking to you today. Thank you for coming along.
Thanks for having me.
Heading down to Teesside, and yeah, thank you very much.
Pleasure.